Today we're going to build a bat house, more of a bat condo, out of 5 cedar fence pickets and part of our big red dog. Okay, from the dog-eared side, we're going to cut 3 boards at 30 inches. Now, since we don't always trust measurements to match, I just usually butt mine up against each other, go right to the blade, and then I pull the one that I know is right out of the way, and then make my cut. Just like that. Okay, now we cut our 30-inch pieces off of the already dog-eared portions of the fence, and because I don't trust them to always be the same, I just measured across mine, and it looks like we are at 16.5 exactly across there. We're going to need to know that because we're going to put our other layers for the bat house going this way, horizontally, and the back will be vertical. Okay, now those same 3 boards that we just cut 30 inches off of, we're going to cut those same 3, we're going to cut 16.5 inches off, and then what's left should be about 25.5 inches that we're going to use to make the 2 sides and the roof. So we're going to cut this about 16.5. Okay, so now that we've got all of our cuts made, we're going to kind of lay them out so you can kind of see what it's going to be. These are going to be the back, these 2 are going to be the sides, and that one is going to be the roof. Then we're going to lay these out in such a way that they're going to go across like this. And we're going to have a small gap at the bottom. Then we're going to do the next layer. Will be like this. 1, 2. Then the same gap we're going to put here, and this one here, and then the very top layer will just be 1, 2, and 3 that will cover up that gap. Okay, and then in between each layer, you're going to have the depth of this is going to be your difference between the layers, and so we will use these extra pieces to make that difference happen. Okay? Okay, now we have pre-drilled and then screwed holes along the edge here, just 2 right now, just placeholder screws basically, and also here along the roof line. Okay, and they are going into these bottom boards here, these 1, 2, 3, those board, this board. Nothing is connecting really this middle board right now to either of these 2 other than this roof, but that's going to change. So the next thing we're going to do is use these extra pieces here as spacers, because the distance that the bats need is about a 1/2 inch to a 3/4 of an inch hole. Well, these pieces of wood happen to be about 3/4 deep, so we're just going to lay them in here, just another piece of fence picket. We're going to lay them in there just as spacers, just to hold everything in place, and then this is going to be our first board, and we will screw it in from the side, here and here, and from the outside, 2 screws coming in on the other side. Then, once it's in place, we will move these pieces, these space holder pieces, we will move them down and do the next board. And these are just going to slide out and move to the next one when we do that, okay? But that's what those are for. So that's the next step. Now, one thing you're going to want to do is before you start attaching your boards up inside this pocket here of the roof, you are going to want to take, I just took like an old screw and just made some etch marks. They're going to need a way to grip and climb on each level. So you want to start all the way down at the end and work your way all the way up to the top. That will give them a place to grip so that they can climb themselves up inside the actual bat house. So you'll want to do that on each layer. Okay, so now we've got our first layer done. We've done 3 boards and then a gap and then our 4th board. And on the side you can see that we've just used 2 screws for each board. We drilled pilot holes and then screwed them. Now Cohen is trying to make some etches in these pieces of wood as well, just like we did here, for them to have something to grip on, because essentially they should land here, crawl up underneath here, and then they can go from this level up onto here and down onto here either way. In some cases they can go from here all the way up into here, but we're gonna be putting in multiple layers here. We're got 2 more layers to go, so that they'll have plenty of room for plenty of bats. Okay, so now we're done with our second layer, and you'll notice on the first layer our gap was here, and this one the gap is here, and that's to allow 2 things. One, when the bats come and they land here, they can crawl up underneath here and then have a way to get between layers. They can kind of maneuver between layers. We will have 3 more boards coming here, here, and covering that hole, and then that will leave this same distance of this gap will be essentially down here at the bottom of this, like this. So they can also land here and get up in this top layer and then maneuver down into the next layer and then down into the bottom layer, or this way, from if they land here they can go and maneuver up through there. And it also helps with ventilation. And again, like on every layer, Cohen is now making some etch marks, which are basically just grippers to help them move around in there a little bit better. It gives them something to grab a hold of. And they don't need to be perfectly straight or anything like that, because in nature they're going to grab a hold of the bark on a tree or inside a cave. The structures aren't going to be perfectly straight. So as long as you've just got etches across there where they can grip, they'll be just fine. And this is what it looks like once you've got it completed. You'll have 3 boards here, and then again, this is kind of one landing pad, and they can crawl up into here, and because of the little gaps that we left, they can go from this level to this level to this level, and so then they can crawl up underneath there and be able to migrate between levels. They can land on here or on here when they, hit it, and then they can scurry up into there, and then from here they can either go all the way to the top, or they can go down through the groove and end up in this middle layer, or they can land here and be on the bottom layer, or they can kind of do the same thing. They can go up through that gap to the to this middle layer from there, and then on up into the top, or vice versa. There's kind of stair steps, and that's why we built it that way, so that they can migrate between layers. And we made it out of cedar to help with insects, so that insects don't build nests up in here before the bats can. But this is kind of what it looks like once it's complete. And then we just mounted just kind of an old 2x4 to it, so that we have something to mount it to between a couple of trees once we actually mount it out in the field there. That way they have a good place to go. Also, when you mount them, you want it to be able to get some sunlight, especially in the winter. For us, we are going to try to face it toward the east with the rising sun, because everything to the west of us is trees, and so our whole yard to the west of us is just a big bunch of woods, and so there's not much light. Once it gets past about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not much light down on the ground because the trees block it out. So we're going to mount ours kind of on the edge of those trees, on the edge of that patch of woods there, facing the west and facing south, so that it protects them in the winter from the north wind, but also that they have kind of a southern sun and a southern southwestern exposure in the winter. And then in the summer, it will kind of keep them not as hot. So that's kind of the way we're going to mount them, but you can mount them however you want and wherever you want. So hopefully this is something that you can do for yourself. If I can build it, trust me, you can do it. I'm not a carpenter, I'm not a builder of any kind, but this was pretty easy to put together. My son and I did it, and it didn't take us very long to put it together.